everyone. Nice to get a little flavour of our incredible journalism being done at all times around the world. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. We've got another incredible lineup of speakers this afternoon, as well as everyone in the room. I'd like to say hello to everyone watching on the live stream. So far, we've had more than 1 million people view these sessions. So welcome to all of you from around the world watching online. Now, a quick little reminder that we have a mix of sessions that are moderated by our Reuters journalism team from our Reuters newsroom. They come under the Reuters Trust Principles. We also have some sessions moderated by our colleagues in events. So there's a lot to get through this afternoon. I'd also like to mention that we want to get your feedback on these sessions. In order to give feedback, if you go to the Reuters Events app, excuse me, if you make sure that you add the session to your agenda, then you'll have the ability to give feedback when the session is over. But up next is a session that I am very much looking forward to. We're talking about humanoids and does the reality match the hype? This session is hosted by Reuters journalist, Reuters tech correspondent, Crystal Hu. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. As a tech correspondent in Silicon Valley who follows the money, this is one of my favorite topics to explore, the world of humanoids. And today, I'm so glad to be joined by two voices from different aspects of this world, which is Wendy, who runs interactions with robotics research as an associate professor at Cornell. And then we got an industry voice, Nick, who started his own robotics company last year after running research at NASA for decades. So to set the stage, I would love for you guys to explain a little bit of the frenzy and the surging in demand and the talks we're seeing among humanoid robotics. How has it changed since the burst of ChatGPT? How is it different? The research people are trying to do now, the robotics they're trying to build now is different from the last generation we're seeing. Maybe we'll start with you, Nick, because you've been in the field for a long time and you started this latest humanoid one last year.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the panel and welcome everyone. Yeah, things are materially different, especially in the last, call it, 36 months. I've been in the industry about 30 years. I've been building humanoids my entire career, got my start at NASA, and then became an entrepreneur, several companies in now. You know, if you contrast even 10 years ago, if you wanted to take a robot into a room and have it identify objects and plan on how it might pick something up, they were very fragile. It would take a legion of programmers 6 months to get a task to work. And it was not robust to the uncertainties and the vagaries of real dynamics in the environment. But now with the advent of some of the modern deep learning technologies that we're using under the umbrella of artificial intelligence, these robots are being able to make decisions in real time that were very robust. And the whole programming aspect of these have changed. We're not really so much programming in them anymore as they are actually learning from their own mistakes as we teach them how to do things better. And that's really what has altered the landscape and, in my opinion, driven a lot of the most recent investments. Because coupled to the economic engine that we think this is going to produce in a number of different verticals, it makes for a very material investment opportunity.
Wendy, in your research on how people interact with robots, and now obviously we all get a taste of the intelligence of things like ChatGPT, how does that impact the way people thinking about build and potentially inserting that intelligence into a physical body like a robotics of humanoids?
Yeah, I thank you for asking that. I mean, I think, the thing that is different about this, dare I say, hype cycle for robotics from any previous hype cycle we've had is that this time around people are really excited about interaction. And I think one of the reasons why they're excited about interaction is that the demand is not so much to replace human labor or to automate systems or get increased workplace efficiency. The goal is actually to have more data about the real world. I think earlier in this conference, people have talked about physical AI, and really we're facing the situation that LLMs, as amazing as they are, they're very data hungry, and they've used most of the data that is legally and some not so legally available. And so robotics is actually the way that we're going to be able to get kind of the next terabytes of information that we need to kind of feed this hungry engine. And the skills that the robots need to have are a little bit less about the ability to do physical manipulation or to do tasks, but to interact with people, because that's the way the LLMs are the most useful, talking to people. And so I think there's a way in which the chat-based AI has really driven like this generation of robotics, and it has a different focus than previous ones.
Mm. And but to build on that, let's talk about the form factor of humanoid. Like we can talk to robotics in different shapes and forms. Why do we need a humanoid, and where do we actually need them? Maybe we'll start with you, Nick.
Yeah, I think that question's to me. With the guy with the humanoid company. So this is controversial, obviously, and an anthropomorphic form or a robot that takes the shape of somebody that looks like a person, it's not needed everywhere. I think that's one of the things that we really need to talk about. I think the coming revolution in embodied AI or robotics in general is it's going to be a diversity and a stratification across industry. Even in some of the industries that we're focused on, the humanoid is only one aspect of an overarching strategy of automation. The reason you need a humanoid is because this entire world has been built around the form factor of you and I. The door handle height on that door was designed for the 80th percentile human being. The table height, everything that you want a robot to interact with, you start deriving a form that looks very similar to us. And then the next question is, well, why would you need legs? Legs are an incredible way to locomote. And it's not just that they deal with uneven terrain really well, but they also deal with really crowded and cluttered spaces. Imagine if you had a Segway or a wheeled device and you were trying to take it down through one of these rows of chairs. You'd be moving the chairs out of the way. But the ambulation form of bipedal locomotion allows you a whole lot of ways to locomote. And so you can kind of shuffle your way through the rows. You can kind of scoot by. And so I think sometimes we get caught up in that, oh, why do you need legs? That just doesn't make any sense to us. But I wouldn't even be able to walk off the stage with a wheeled platform. And I can assure you most of the world looks like this. It doesn't look like a pristine, flat floor in a huge warehouse. And so I think there's a lot of case to be made that bipedal locomotion is far more useful than what we kind of jokingly say, oh, why does the robot have legs?
Wendy, I know you have some evolved thinking on the spectrum of form factor. Do we need humanoids or not? Where are you now?
Well, I will say I'm one of the big humanoid skeptics. A lot
Me
of my
too.
research has revolved around interactive.
That's why we have you guys on the panel about humanoids.
We have robot trash barrels, we have robot chairs, and mostly what I want to point out about the stuff that I've done in my research is that a lot of times people say that you need the humanoid form factor so that people will know how to interact with the robot. And what we see is that people interact socially with things that don't look, like a person at all. They don't have to have googly eyes. They don't have to have arms. People have a social intuition about how to interact, and they can apply it to all sorts of different other form factors of machines. And so when it comes to any environment where there's going to be people, people have been arguing they have to be humanoid, and I have been really skeptical. I think now my thinking has evolved. I think that the humanoid form factor is one form factor, and I actually don't think that we should eliminate any form factors. I definitely think there are, like Nicholas is saying, some scenarios where you really need, you can't redesign the environment around the robot. So for example, like the Fukushima plant, like if the whole environment has been set up by people and there's no option to go back and retroactively install things for the robot, you actually really need things that can actually manage that and do the things that people do. But I think in a lot more situations, what you actually have is control over the environment. If every one of these chairs was robotic, you could move any kind of machine in the middle because the chairs could get out of the way.
Yeah.
So I think in some ways what we should be looking at is a federation of different kinds of form factors where the humanoid is just one.
And Nick, you obviously have picked your bets by building a humanoid robotics companies, and we have talked about advantage and why you chose that form factor. What are the real world difficulties and challenges of building a humanoid that actually have the dexterity and flexibility as a human?
I mean, a humanoid design challenge is like a 100,000-piece puzzle. And sometimes some of those pieces have fallen onto the ground, and you hope there's not a little spot missing in your puzzle of an Eiffel Tower, right? So It's an enormous challenge. It's a full software stack problem. It's a full hardware stack problem. It's an integration problem. Running a company is an execution problem. Constantly dealing with funding and hiring and clients and pressures of adoption and trying to get a pilot to work and actually close a business case. It's a very complicated thing. So on the design side, we live in a very physical world. The promise of humanoids isn't that they look like a person or that they're going to be this romantic evolution of someday folding your laundry in your home. It's that the last 50 years has been characterized by the ubiquitous manipulation of the virtual world, and we've conquered that. The next 50 is going to be the ubiquitous manipulation of the physical world. And we are looking forward to a day where being able to move things in the environment, manipulate objects at will, on demand, is going to become the status quo. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we live in a world that has been designed with interfaces for people. And so you have a human hand with 5 fingers that governs the entire infrastructure of the planet. And you're not going to go through and rebuild and redesign $1 trillion or $10 trillion worth of infrastructure to then put in an overfit, bespoke robotic system. You're going to put something in place that has the capability to interface with those interfaces. Unfortunately, for a lot of design engineers, it's going to require something that looks a lot like this. Now, that in and of itself is an exceptional challenge. There is an ecosystem of companies that are working on replicating the human hand or the functioning of the human hand. And it's a very, very large design challenge. There's as much engineering that goes into the hand of a humanoid as the entire rest of the humanoid by itself. It's its own robot attached to a walking robot. In fact, at Persona, we have a whole separate design team just dedicated to the hand, completely separate from the rest of the robot, because it's its own problem. But whoever unlocks that wins, period.
I've heard that actually collecting the data and knows like detail things that we don't even think about as a human is the grip of how you hold something. Like if it's something lighter, you use a different grip than how you would pull the door, is actually a very difficult, technically difficult challenge.
Yeah, I mean, the human hand is fascinating. I mean, depending on what literature you're reading, it's between 18 and 20 degrees of freedom. It's got its muscles in the forearm. It's extrinsically actuated. It's got tendons that run through the carpal tunnel. There's actually really no muscles in your hand. The tendons terminate into your fingers, and you've got this antagonistic drive where you can almost extend and then flex with equal force in your fingers. Extremely difficult to replicate electromechanically. The packaging, the thermal considerations, the strength, the feeling, it's an enormous challenge. And then couple that to data aggregation collection techniques that allow us to use machine learning technologies to come up with grasping strategies in order to move objects around. I mean, it is an enormous challenge. And unlike LLMs, we can't scrape the internet for the entire corpus of human knowledge. We have to generate this data ourselves, then train the robots, teach them how to do it, then modify some foundation model that approaches grasping an object that has some utility in the business world, so some investor will give me $1 so someday I can fly a private jet. I mean, that's literally how all this thing's trying to go down.
A reminder to the audience that we can scan the QR code here to ask the panelists any questions, but also to kind of move to the adoption side where the money is going to coming from. I'm curious in your conversations with a lot of the industrial use cases and other companies, where do you see maybe the first adopters for humanoids, and where do you guys think the adoption curve for humanoid will look like in general in the real world? Maybe we'll start with you.
I mean, I think that, I'm not saying that I think this is wise, but there's going to be a real market for humanoids kind of as a, thing that you have in your home, something to talk to. And I don't think that it's going to actually fold laundry better than a person would. I mean, in the time that you're waiting for the laundry to be folded, you'll just get angry and start folding it yourself. But I think there's a way in which having a humanoid robot is a kind of performance of futurosity. It's like having a cuckoo clock, back when, like, the kind of thing that canonized what, like, Swiss ingenuity was that you could actually make this machine happen this way. So I think there's a way in which, for fun, and to show that we're kind of forward-looking, we might have humanoids, but I just don't know if they're going to be useful. I think they'll be fun to talk to. It'll be fun to show off to your friends. It will make you look like a really fancy, rich person. But I think for a lot of the things that you want a robot to do, there's form factors that are better than what humans do. Like the human hand is so cool. I definitely think I'm a nerd, and I want to see the human hand replicated. And one of the things that's cool is when we try to make the technology, we actually understand, the natural hand better. But what I see is that you see these robot companies with these really cool hand demos, and then they had the videos that they showed to the manufacturing, and they had these giant suction cup plates, because giant suction cup plates lift things much better than any hand can. And in fact, like a humanoid hand, like no one's demonstrated that you can do things with the 5 fingers better than you can do with 3 fingers. And so there's this way in which we can do cool things because they're moonshot things, but I think what's going to be useful, and what people are going to want in the home, that's actually something else.
It's fascinating that laundry and moonshot is in one sentence. And you'll be surprised at how many audience questions we're getting is about robotics doing laundry for them. So I think you just crashed their hopes, Wendy. But to build on that, can you explain why something like laundry, which is so mundane and simple for a human to do, but actually very hard for?
Yeah, I mean, so laundry is, first of all, it's heterogeneous. You have lots of different kinds of laundry, all these different kinds of shapes. It's soft, and things like flop around. It actually, over the course of the time that you're folding, it goes from like warm to cold, and actually the dynamics of the material change when you're doing that. And then there's these other things like the laundry machines, if you don't move them because you're trying to use the environment as it's set up for a person, they tend to have the dryers up high, and like you have to lean in. And for a robot,
yeah, it needs to look like a person to do that, doesn't it?
To like lean in and grab something, like that's super hard. I mean, it's literally, laundry service is very cheap.
The cost of perspective.
Yeah, and then you can just like buy clothes that don't wrinkle, and you can just have everything in a pile. But it will be really cool when we have it.
Yes. And Nick, I know you're trying to address a lot of questions beyond the laundry. What are the use cases you're seeing and trying to adopt for your customers?
I think we need to have a tempered outlook, like Wendy has been so generously conveying, and I do agree with that. I don't think the home or laundry is going to be a viable use case
to save money.
Whatever, in 10 years. I firmly believe that. Now, the home market might be the market. It may be the thing that just dominates everything. But let's not forget, it took us 25 years to go from the horse and buggy to the automobile. Industry transformations are non-trivial, especially when you're disrupting huge ecosystems of the way something is done. So I think we cannot underestimate the amount of time it's probably going to take to pull this off. I mean, we're still working on self-driving cars. It's been 15 years, right? And that's just like a planar thing, and just don't run over a dog. So it's like these are tough challenges. Now, what's going to drive, I think, very early adoption, and what has influenced us at Persona has been, what's a credible business case that we can close early? And so we need to look at where there's an enormous, acute industry demand of labor that cannot be filled. What has national and strategic initiatives associated with it? What clients have purchasing power? What clients have adoption potential or are enthusiastic about adoption? Because you're going to need some patience to get this done. And so what we found is the skilled trades and heavy industry have some of the most pressing use cases, not because they're trying to save money. I don't think this is a cost problem. This is a production problem. In fact, what I've learned by pitching investors is don't go in and try to say, oh, we're going to save 20% on this operation, right? No one's going to care. Not unless you can save like 90%, right? So what we're talking about is people cannot produce things because they cannot hire the folks. And we need to have a serious conversation about demographics and the worldwide population rate decline significantly. We're going to peak at about 9 billion people. The UN estimates that after that, we're probably going to peel over. This will be the first time in human history the population of the world is going down, sustained, with the growth rate going down, sustained. So in 25 years, 1 in 3 people in Japan and Korea will be over the age of 65. 1 in 4 in the US, 1 in 6 worldwide. To give you some context, it's 1 in 11 right now. Who's going to do the things we need to do the things? So this is actually a real pressing problem. And so what we found is the skilled trades are the ones that are being very eroded. Everybody wants to be a YouTuber now. Nobody wants to be a welder. So at Persona, we said, okay, let's look at those things. They have very strong economics behind them. We can close early business cases, and we can design the machines and the AI stack to accomplish that. And that's the pursuit that we're on.
How about other industrial use cases that we already seen some certain level of the automations, like warehouses, logistics? Where are you standing?
I mean, I'm really bullish in a lot of different ways. Although I do share Wendy's concerns that not all markets are created equal. I think there's some incredible humanoid and robotics companies out there going about what they think the right thing to do is, and I'm rooting them all on. Trust me, I'm rooting them all on. I believe that some markets are probably better suited in the short term than others. We looked for markets that really express the humanoid form. You ever walked around a shipyard? It is enormously challenging. Uneven surfaces, grates, ladders. It's insane. You're never going to design a robot on a Segway to roll around a shipyard and do welding. And we have a partnership with HD Hyundai to do welding in their shipyards in 2027. And so this is the perfect market to be looking at for humanoids. Contrast that with the home. I think there's enormous challenges. I can't imagine a humanoid standing at your doorway, serving you coffee, trying to pack the kids' lunch as the dog is trying to bite at its ankles and the 6-year-old's running down the staircase trying not to, the humanoid's trying not to fall on everybody. I'm like, let's just delay that one a little bit and let's go after welding.
We have a very global audience, both here in the room and also watching us from live stream. So I want to talk about kind of the global AI race between China and the US, especially in the context of robotics and humanoids. You guys probably all have seen like some of the Chinese robotics dancing and playing kung fu from local companies like Unitree. And in general, they are kind of known for the manufacturing pieces and also their supply chain advantages. So as someone who are building the robotics on the ground, and Wendy, you have like looking into different shape of robotics and how people interact with them, like where are the advantages and disadvantages on both sides if like we're considering this as like problems that people race to solve?
I mean, I think that it's really fun to see like we go to robot conferences now and they have these robots like darting through the conference hall. And it's really something. But when it's not darting through the conference hall, it's a little funny. Sometimes they're just like lying on the ground. Or sometimes
a lot of the spectators are lying on the ground too when they get tired.
They put them like on a lawn chair. And it's because one of the things is they use a lot of power just to stay upright. They don't have nearly the degrees of freedom that people do, and so they have to do a lot to compensate for that like bipedal form factor. So it's really cool that it can happen, but it's not super sustainable. I think some of the things they've done to try to make that work are things like hot swappable power systems and things. So if you are constantly feeding it new batteries, you can make it work. But the fact that we get so excited about it is maybe the reason why the humanoid form factor is still interesting, and there might be applications which use that. But I don't think it's a good replacement for work, though.
Do you feel like China has advantage in manufacturing or supply chain in building those robotics?
I mean, for manufacturing, I think everyone buys their motors from China. I don't know who doesn't. A lot of electronics manufacture goes through China. So I don't think it's a good idea to start a trade war at this moment in time, is what I will say for my industry. But yeah, so I think from that standpoint, they might have an advantage. On the other hand, I think there are just big blind spots in all of these technical industries where people don't really understand the human element. And right now, I don't see any culture that actually has, the lock on that. And I think there could be so much more investment on that front. And in fact, you probably have to do that investment every single place, because if you've done the research and understand one deployment site, you understand one deployment site. Every single place is really contextually specific. You really have to understand that spot specifically.
Yeah, just going back to your power autonomy remark, totally agree. If you take the best walking robot right now, humans are still about 10 times more efficient in walking than the best humanoids. Couple that to the fact that human fat stores about 30 times more energy than batteries. So humanoids are at a significant. I can walk, 100 miles on a Snickers bar, and you're not going to get a humanoid to do that anytime soon. But there are ways around it: hot swappable batteries, optionally tethered. I don't see that as being the biggest impediment. But as far as China is concerned, there are some exceptional companies demonstrating some things that we all watch on YouTube, and we huddle around our computer and we look at it and we say, "How are they doing that? Like, this is insane stuff." And there's some exceptional companies out there that are inspiring all of us to, and it is a global race.
I don't know if it's a race. I mean, like, I think, for example, like a lot of the really cool technologies that have come out now have really drawn a lot from this, like, open source MIT mini cheetah motor. And this is made by a master's student, you know, at MIT.
Sang-Bae Kim did that cheetah motor.
I mean, that's the professor in charge of that lab. Yeah, and so, like, but then you can see no one in the U.S. has been able to replicate those at the scale or the cost that the Chinese manufacturers have been able to do. But without the design, a lot of the things that we're seeing now, the robot dogs, you know, some of the humanoids, like, we wouldn't see them. And so it's not, I don't think it's to the advantage of this field for anybody to be framing it as a race. Heaven forbid we start locking things up or stop sharing, because I think you will just see everything stop very suddenly. A lot of what we have seen happen is happening because there's shared research and because there's shared technology and open markets where you can buy all these components. And one of the first things that will keep automation from happening is a trade war.
Have you seen any impact from trade war, from what you guys are trying to build?
Yeah, some costs have gone up, for sure. It hasn't affected us too much. We have a lot of domestic and Western countries suppliers. Not all people buy their motors from China, although most magnets come from China, we'll give you that. But a lot of motors, there are some domestic motor manufacturers. Listen, I mean, you can't ignore the horsepower that the Chinese represent. I do disagree with you, though. It is absolutely a race, and there's a point in time that no one can see beyond. I don't want to call it the singularity or anything crazy like that, but there is absolutely a point in time to whoever figures some of these seminal challenges out, where those use cases are going to exist, how that's going to change the power dynamics worldwide, and it is going to be on the undercurrent of embodied AI. I can assure you of that. And everything and all of the stack that goes into it is going to have far-reaching implications. And depending on where you come down on, is that best in this country's hands or this country's hands? It's anyone's guess. But I mean, I like where I live and I like what we do, so that's where I'm at.
Well, on that note, this is a great conversation. I love when panelists disagree with each other while agree on some things. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Nick.
Wow, super thought-provoking conversation. Really appreciate it, guys. I just want to remind you all that this afternoon, after the coffee break, we have a panel on how creators and influencers are reshaping journalism with Tara Palmieri, Ben Shapiro, Don Lemon, and David Pacman. So that is one to stick around for sure. Up next, we have a session that we hope will challenge the way that you think about people, potential, and the future of work. This session is hosted in partnership with WorkHuman. It is moderated by Pavni Mittal with WorkHuman founder and Chief Executive Officer Eric Mosley.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone here. Hi, Eric. Good to have you here.
Great to see you.
So we've been talking a lot about the perils and promise of AI. On one hand, there's a lot of anxiety whether machines can replace humans. Yeah. But there's another school of thought that actually AI can help people thrive, and that is your school of thought, I believe. Eric, welcome to Reuters Next. Could you give us a sense of how the economic situation, or rather the economic uncertainty, as well as whatever's happening with AI, just how it's leapfrogging, how that has changed the talent landscape?
Yeah, I think the HR community and the world of work has gone through just an unbelievable upheaval in the past number of years. Obviously, starting with the pandemic, where the entire world's workforce has just retreated to their basement and dialed into work. And even now, the aftermath of that has been hybrid working. What happened in that situation was there was a kind of a degradation of culture in companies because people weren't interacting anymore. And the fabric of a culture is the community of people at work and the relationships between them. So in that kind of time period, we found that relationships kind of withered and culture kind of decayed throughout that time period. So it's very hard for leaders and CHROs to kind of galvanize a workforce against an objective and a new set of values, for example. And then secondly now with AI, there's this unbelievable call to action to say you should reinvent the whole way everyone works in the company to be enabled by AI. And the task that's being given to CHROs is sometimes pretty severe. It's, we have to be in a situation where we have 10% or 20% less headcount in a year, and you need to use AI to facilitate that. I was at a CHRO dinner only a month ago, and half the table raised their hands to say they had a command like that from the board of the company, but yet none of them knew how to get there because the AI tools just weren't mature enough. The output wasn't, efficient enough and sophisticated enough so that they didn't need the humans. So you have all of this turmoil, this chaos happening in the world of work, and it's hard for HR leaders and the C-class to kind of navigate through that.
And let's actually put this question to the audience here. Who over here has a mandate to, use AI and just isn't sure that it's going to really, you have the right tools to do that? Is there anyone here? Just raise. Okay, well, one person. So you were in a room with more nervous people. Now WorkHuman deals a lot with recognition.
Yeah.
How does recognition fit into the picture over here? How does it address these concerns?
So WorkHuman is a recognition provider. We have a software platform which provides a platform for companies to run recognition programs, which are they allow employees to give thanks to each other, to give a recognition award to each other when they see great work. So it's almost like the leadership of the company delegates to the employees to have reinforcement for a job well done. So whenever any employee sees great work, they should thank them and show gratitude. And that's a core human need that we all have, is to feel that when we do great work, that somebody sees it. There's a witness, that you feel that you're appreciated. It's kind of one of the central tenets of Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. So that concept alone energizes employees and a community. And the fact when one person says thank you to another and writes a kind of paragraph of text describing the work that they witnessed, that also makes the giver actually more connected to the recipient and more connected to their company. So both the giver and the receiver of the recognition have closer relationships, they feel more tied to the community, and their kind of performance and engagement goes up. There's energy in the workforce goes up. But the second derivative of that is that those text descriptions of the work, cumulatively, they are like a narrative about competencies and work and achievement and everything that goes on in the company. We've worked with some major Fortune 500 companies, the Cisco's and Dell's and Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer and all of these incredible companies. And the recognition program is the entire workforce documenting everybody else's work in that kind of positive light. And so that's incredible data. And what does AI need to flourish? It needs data. Data is the critical factor to make AI systems powerful and intelligent. So recognition data is just laden with these kind of insights.
So, you mentioned that managers are grappling with having their employees adopt AI. So how does recognition help with that very specific goal?
So a great example of that is a customer of ours called Sanofi, global pharmaceutical company. They used their recognition program to concentrate the minds of the employee base on AI adoption. So that when somebody was giving an award or they were saying thank you, they asked the employee base to be on the lookout for AI adoption achievement and to say thank you for that. And so they were able to bend the will and the minds of the employee base to think about AI adoption and to document when it happened. We were so inspired by their use of that, we actually created a feature called Corporate Topics, and it allows customers to actually create a topic like AI adoption or safety in the workplace or Six Sigma, whatever it happens to be, but create a corporate topic and monitor the work that goes on all across the company associated with that topic, so managers then can see whether it's going up or going down, the volume of work, and whether the employees have really taken it to their heart that this is a corporate strategic initiative. And so Sanofi did that, and what they found was that, yes, the employees were more engaged, the productivity was higher, but also this concept of AI adoption was more crystal clear in the minds of the organization.
There's a question that's come in that's actually about data privacy. It says, how do you strike the balance between collecting data on employees and not being too creepy? So basically, data privacy, how do you strike that balance?
Well, we try and err on the side of not being too creepy. So ultimately, most recognition programs, and certainly with WorkHuman, there is a central public feed of these moments. So you can, when you're saying thank you to somebody on a recognition platform, you can mark it as private. And if it's marked as private, then nobody sees it other than you and the recipient. But the majority, I would say 90+% of recognition moments are marked as public, and they go up on the corporate awards feed. So they are public in nature within the company. And in fact, one of the fastest growing, I would say, aspects of recognition is being able to push that kind of communication outside the company, to LinkedIn, to other areas. So yeah, people have the choice of making it private if it is private, but most of the time, to get the benefit of somebody feeling rewarded and that there's a witness to the great work that they do, it's good for it to be shared. Because that's what gives them that proof that people noticed.
How do you, speaking of sharing, how do you implement this when you have, especially for big companies, employees around the world, and then, there's also remote work. Yeah. So how do you make sure that someone sitting in the basement is, being recognized aptly as someone who's coming to the office 4 times a week?
Well, it is a great point because, again, the people sitting at home can be very isolated. This is one of the things that happens with work from home. It feels good at the start, but then over time it starts to wither in terms of your connections and your relationships with other people. So recognition where you're receiving recognition from your colleagues or you're giving recognition to your colleagues, it deepens the relationship, so it brings people who are remote, it brings them into the kind of central community of the company. We're a global organization. We, as I mentioned, those customers. A good example would be British Airways. They've 38,000 people across the whole world, as you can imagine. A company that came through the pandemic and had to rebuild the culture of the company because travel organization really impacted. And they launched a recognition program everywhere. Their NPS, eNPS, so that's Employee Net Promoter Score, went up 60 points after they implemented the recognition program. And employees were 2x less likely to leave the company. So they recreated that culture and kind of galvanized the employees and made them feel like they belong. Another example would be Eaton. Eaton is 88,000 employees all over the world, big oil and gas services company. So they have employees on oil rigs and just in far-flung places in the world. And again, they were able to increase, 80% of their employees said that they felt connected and valued by the company. And they had a half the turnover level for those people who were rewarded. So, yeah, you can bring everybody together, no matter what languages they speak or where they live. And what they'll feel more connected to is the community at work.
So we have all this data, and then we have,